All right, if you want to just introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Alfred Darlington, and I go by Daedelus.
Nice.
Mostly. Sometimes.
More so than Alfred these days?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm Professor Daedalus now, officially at school, and that was an odd switch for me. Berkeley, as an institution, isn't really like a publishing, it's as an academic institution, it's more about like skill-based work. But if I ever did want to publish and have it be counted towards the work I'd previously done, I had to pick a name that was published under. And so since I put out records as Daedalus, they recommended that I keep Daedalus as my name. So although I've been known as Daedalus professionally, on stages for a while, it's strange to walk off stage and still be that thing.
Yeah.
It was always an aspirational name anyways. It wasn't ever the thing I was. It was just this thing that existed a little outside of myself. But I guess as you get older, you become the thing you want to be or something. So slightly.
Yeah. It's like your step. Did you used to not, as an artist, did you have an on and off switch before?
No, never. That's the reason, the aspirational nature of it. It was something that I could look towards and kind of be about. I don't know if I gave myself permission to always be creative. I come from a background not of profound creativity. It isn't like my family or a bunch of musicians.
Okay.
Creative people granted, but in the kind of way that wasn't sound based, and so I don't always understand, especially to be out loud and to be performative wasn't. I had my issues with that, but I think over time you get either more mellow in your skin, or you just start to care less, or some mix of just being on the wave.
Yeah.
That you kind of, in some ways my offering now is a lot more on my skin than it used to be.
Yeah.
So that way maybe the on and off switch is slightly present, but in a way that's like mellowed, so now that the switch is broken and it's just always in its state that it's in.
It's gotta be refreshing. I mean, it's a lot at the same time. But
totally. And so much about the way it's witnessed. You oftentimes performing, people want to see you succeed, right? They want to see you, they want to cheer it, they want to have a good time. They're out looking for that, right? They're seeking that. And so the only time you can mess it up is when you are basically a contrarian. You can either be a resolute, resounding unity gain of goodness, or you can kind of somehow postulate something that is against.
Okay.
I'm really all for being for, but I like profound freedom too, and sometimes I guess that breaks people's conception of what their freedom is when you intersect it with hey, all this choice, and we're gonna do it all, and some people I guess feel uncomfortable with that amount.
There's a lot of options. It gets overwhelming.
But entropy is, I know it's an overused term, but it's all over the place, and it's tearing our atoms apart at any given moment. So let's just be good.
Yeah. I'm with that 100%. But it's almost like, I know if you truly become Daedalus full time, then it's you, so you can't mess it up, because as long as you're you. Totally.
Yeah, but I also I kind of think if you do something perfectly, you should stop doing it.
Yeah.
If you have some striving, and I think that's what people generally, and I keep on making these declarative sentences about people, but in my experience, witnessing it for some time now, for the past 20 years, striving is more what they like to see on a stage. They like to see when people reach for something, and through ability or luck, they get there. And oftentimes where they get to isn't necessarily what the original intention was. It's profound. That's the best nights, is when you all upend and fly through the club together in a way that you never thought was possible. And I've experienced that enough to want that desperately every night, every time I play. I want it to be something absolutely impossible, and seemingly, but also within reach.
Versus feeling like
I'm playing.
He knows exactly what to do, what time here.
Yeah.
How do you feel about? So I would guess that you probably feel that you could never really master a craft then.
Yeah. No. You glance into it. You have graceful moments that are full of. Outside of oneself. And I never really think you can really get outside of yourself. I never think you can get out of your reality, out of your perception. You can just borrow into others, but it's still through your lenses. But that being said, I think just by lucky, dumb coincidence, at times we blunder into enlightenment. The brief flashes, we get it, we receive it, we transmit it wherever, all over the place all at once. The alpha and the omega, or whatever those kind of phrases are.
Yeah.
But then it's over usually just as fast as you were there. But the only thing about it though, music is this incredible time machine.
Yes.
It allows you to travel back in time through things like nostalgia, or just the presence of memory, sense memory, or it allows you to fast forward time and make things timeless, and all. These are words we use as descriptors. We use them very lightly, right? Like something's a timeless piece, but also quite literally, like when you were in that flow flux moment of just like in sound, sometimes truly nothing is occurring or nothing has ever happened, or you're just so adrift. And so I think when you combine profound experiences with profound sound experiences, you can have like long moments in that very graceful place.
I don't necessarily believe time is real anyway.
It's very much a construct.
But I felt like you would you know where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, with music, that definitely shows the stuff that stands the test of time is really a testament to,
Well, sound is a temporal art. So on the macro, it's, experiences that shift culture, in ways that a lot of other art forms aren't capable of. And in the micro, it's just like, it's messing with our mitochondria. It's like moving around our tiny bones in our body. Like it's doing all those things.
It's vibration, and more than anything else that we interact with, I think.
But it's vibration we've decided means something, which is weird, because there's all kinds of other vibration going on that we haven't given emotions to. And yet here's these, we've ascribed certain ideas to these other ones that are in our perception in those ways. So.
Do you think it's almost a higher form of communication in ways?
I wouldn't necessarily say higher or lower, but it is, at least in our brain chemistry, our brain biology, it's closer to our automatic functions. It lives in the brain, like towards the brainstem, is where music tends to rest in people. Obviously, it moves around. It's not a hard science about where the brain decides to go, but generally speaking, it's in that development area, and so it's closer to really delicate, necessary to live functions. So if you want to believe in evolution in that sense, we basically got stomachs and some of our nervous system, and we started to hear things as music, maybe even before we fully developed our idea of language, because that seems to live in in more developed parts of the brain, or like more recently developed parts of the brain. So it's kind of fascinating. Why would biology, maybe it's arbitrary, but what if it wasn't? What if it was profoundly centered in that place that is near the inhalation of breath and the exhalation of,
That's interesting, because usually you think of like the quote unquote arts as like, something that came along
civilization
later
developed.
It's more of a societal thing.
But no, I mean, like, maybe the way we've practiced music has evolved and changed, but maybe just music itself, or like the way we perceive sound as music, through our ears, through our body, has something much more to do with keeping us alive and cognizant.
I think there's a lot of people who would probably say music has kept them alive.
I would agree
in more ways than one.
And again, it might just be a turn of a phrase for many people, but I think a lot of people like blunder into the profound. We're constantly using words that are metaphors for ideas, and in many ways, it's just like kind of like paper money versus something of value. It's like they're it's like ruins and symbols and like Egyptian hieroglyphics compared to what the meaning is, but the meaning in some ways can be hijacked and become even more powerful for it. So we are constantly betraying our like profundity. I feel like when we're just giving these like funny little emoji-ish conversations, it speaks to many little basic important things.
There's an art to emojis. I mean, they're modern.
Totally,
I love
completely.
It. If an artist doesn't have a good emoji game, I wonder, what do they do?
Well, pictographic systems in general, it's a very nuanced way of communicating, or potentially.
And it's funny, slight sidebar that I've observed. emojis were so much of communication is visual as well as audio, and tone of voice, and that's why written text. That's why there's so many miscommunications in text and emails and everything, because you put your own biases into it as you read it. We had such a golden opportunity to use these emojis, and the phone companies don't have the same one. So I have an Android, and I send one that very clearly to me means something, and then on the other end, it means the opposite. Well, and it was such an opportunity, I think, to like really.
I mean,
get us on
Unix
the
was
same
supposed
page.
to be that unifier, but then we find ways of kind of doing.
We make it difficult.
We make it difficult, absolutely, and even just difficult to not just to understand each other or not just to communicate, but even these phone devices are so imperfect, and we settle on these like rectangles that are off our faces, and somehow are extensions of our nervous system, but they just do such an imperfect job. I'm not looking forward to the singularity as such. Like it'll be what it'll be when it arrives. But I am looking forward to just more useful control systems that really can express. The whole entirety of existence is going on, much faster than we can deal with in these ways, and it won't ever get slower at this point. I mean, maybe we'll go off grid for periods of time, but it'll just ramp back up. And just be really nice to see people get it right. Like you said.
I like that we're gonna see it.
Well, we'll feel it more than anything else. It might be really subtle at first, but there'll be some aspect where somebody's hacked our sensory organs to make it feel more real, more profound, and then we'll know that we're getting close. Right?
I'm excited, man. So you are. I mean, you're obviously, or maybe not obviously. I don't want to put pressure on you there, but you're like renowned musician. Some might say a legend in many ways, but you're clearly thinking about so many other things than music, which is like, how do you take all these other ideas that you're studying and put that into your music?
Well, I will say,
beats,
but I will say that it's all music.
Okay.
Like I don't feel I'm definitely exploring thoughts and ideas. I don't think I have anything original to offer. I just have my perception, and it's really fun to compare notes with other people and like kind of see where the deformation of my sensory apparatus yields these kind of twists and turns that are mine, and other people might take their deformity of their sensory organs and lead it somewhere else. But at the end of the day, it's all music to me. It's all a vibrational. There's so many fundamentals of the physics of sound that I just find resonate with me so deeply, and I don't use resonate in a light fashion. I don't use it, not as a pun, but as a true, profound truth. And so when I really allowed myself to kind of, to let it be sound material, the world started to make a lot more sense.
Okay.
The arbitrary nature of cruelty or of joys that would come to me in my life, when I started to see it more as the longer song playing, or the big sound piece, or what we're allowed to see versus what are subharmonic or above the nature of our listening, and let the metaphor be the sound. Okay. I started to get more enjoyment out of life, delight in the kind of the novelty of this song that's playing. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
No, thanks.
Were you like, so would you say that you're something of a truth seeker, and you were looking for that, and that led you to music, or?
No, it was always music, and I was trying to figure out why it was always music.
Okay.
That was one thing, but then later on, absolutely, there was some things that intersected my life, tragedy and certain kinds of loss or gain, that I didn't know I didn't have a framework, I didn't have tradition. And a lot of times I feel like in ancient culture, and I know this is slightly controversial, but in a lot of ancient texts and tomes, the deities never appeared in our sight, they always were by sound.
Okay.
Right, and then it was only in the Renaissance that we start to depict, a god or the god or, these things. and over time it became more of these visual representations of like the bearded dude as like, you know, the entity or whatever, and it's like, well, this speaks to a lot of maybe, you know, the certain kind of patriarchy really doing its thing, kicking into high gear, and like the kind of concentration of wealth among a few people, and the kind of way power was kind of apprehended from, you know, matriarchal societies and indigenous traditions and cultures. I mean, that was like a huge moment, supposedly, of the kind of heightening of thought, the Enlightenment, but actually in many ways just the concentration of it into Western forms. And so suddenly you take this profound religion and you start boxing it up in just, you know, versions that are very visual and rather than auditory, as if maybe the auditory would have been a tattletale for this truth. And so just kind of that stuff really started to hit me when I had to start dealing with tragedy and looking for frameworks that had existed and just finding them lacking. The religion I grew up in didn't do it, and I didn't really grow up in religion, but I had aspects of that in my life, and other people I've known have traditions where they can, like, you know, they can bury the hatchet quite literally or figuratively and get rid themselves of whatever thing is vexing them. And for me, it's always been sound. I do it on a stage, I'll do it in community. I hear a song and it undoes all of the terrible weights that have been burdening me or buoying me. No.
That's incredible. I never, it's funny because music obviously led me into this room with you, so like I'm on the same path in a few ways, but I never really compared it as much to the other senses, to the level that you have, where I mean the visual leaves a lot that can be messed with, can be toyed with, altered. Is a lot more room for deception, I think, and that's interesting to.
Well, we're all synesthetic.
Like
we're all, I mean, to a degree, our brain is taking our input and deciding what sense it wants to rest it in. But up until we're 1 year old, we're largely synesthetic mishmash, where we'll see something and you'll watch a baby react as if they heard a loud sound, or indeed, like touch will become this whole, like almost like a burning flame of different senses firing off in the brain of an infant. And I think as we retain some of these things, and sometimes we've put up very strong walls between senses, but in many ways, like all of these different ways the perception comes in is just kinds of different frequencies that we're aligned to in these organs. And it's just interesting to think of, we oftentimes think of like taste or smell as being this like real memory-based idea, but in many ways that is just to say that communication is maybe freed from some of the kind of ways that it doesn't estride from the other kind of the way it can dig into different senses, like sight, which is so incredibly rigid generally in how many, if we're going to talk ableist sighted people, receive it. Right.
Okay, so before we keep going.
Yeah, okay.
No, I love it. There are people who are probably listening or watching, as it may be, and they're thinking, all right, he's saying interesting stuff here. I don't fully have the knowledge base to jump into all this. To get to where you've obviously been studying this for a while and thinking and exploring, like, would you recommend a good place for people to start searching for some of this knowledge that you've spoken about?
I mean, I always like this idea of intuition. So intuitively, people have probably had profound experiences with a song. I would really just challenge people to listen to that music that moves them, that really unmoors them, and figure out why for themselves. It doesn't have to be a bunch of science, it doesn't have to be a bunch of religion, it just look deeply into what makes that thing push air, move you, challenge your notions, make you weep, make you blush, make you smile. And I think in that questioning, you'll come to a lot of these same conclusions.
Okay.
There's so much profundity in just a small moment that exists in the chorus of a song, or the build-up, the breakdown. It's like it really is hacking us. And a lot of religion is based on similar auditory or visual cueing. A lot of science is based on kind of measuring and perceiving the kind of way the world is just coming to us, and so just having that metaphor of the song that you know already works for you, and just taking a longer listen to why that might be, and I think some of the stuff will rise to the surface.
All right.
Yeah.
I have to ask you one question about your music, at
sure.
least. This is so I asked my buddy Loman out there from Union Sound. So I know that you were sampled on the Mad Villain record. He was wondering, did you ever work with Doom in any other capacity?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough, because of the accordion song, I did some touring. When they first toured Mad Villain, I played accordion on stage on a few shows. And that same tour was with J-Lib, so I got the chance to kind of tour with J Dilla a little bit, and Madlib, and J-Rock indeed, and yeah, I was young, and so I didn't really do the most out of the experience. I felt a little isolated, and definitely, I played one song on this stage, and so, but I got a chance to hang out with everybody, and got a chance to talk to Doom and his manager, and so we were able, through a series of it was hijinks, but we got a chance to work together on a song. So we did the song Impending Doom on my record Exquisite Corpse, and that was remixed by Rusty, and it was 2005, so a lifetime ago, musically speaking. But that song still shows up sometimes on people's playlists or in my own life. And it's really fun too, because on that song, there's a whole story to the background of it, but even in the recording session, he's like, "Is it okay if I make you a villain?" And I'm like, this coming from the villain himself is everything. So he talks a little bad about me in the song in this funny way. But yeah, I'd recommend, if you come around and check it out, I spell the man's name all in caps, I'll tell you that.
As
so
you
it's
should.
Impending Doom, yeah. So we did that together, and then over the years, I've just kept up. Every once in a while I'll get word, and partially because that song Accordion shows up in his life a lot. I think it's one of those songs that just still has legs, and I'll tell you, as the song has kind of had a tradition and gone on to be sampled by so many people, I feel like it's kept me working with Doom even in ways that he doesn't know.
Okay.
Because
awesome.
He's obviously off in his own madcap plan, but all kind, like Drake did a verse over, or like a version early in his career, and Trey Songz and Tory Lane, and like all these different people have been impacted in such a way. Like Weird Al Yankovic did a version of it.
He's a guy that's had a ranging influence that
Doom?
He still kind of goes unmentioned, except for in like the underground circles, but everybody has interacted with Doom in some way.
Persistence of vision, and I know that's maybe the wrong term after talking a lot about sound, but just the term persistence of vision. He's such a good example of that, and I know he is insanely talented, but talent isn't really, it's an invention, right? Like I think of him as talented. Other people would say the references are too strong, and that his verses are too slow or loping or something. And obviously we all can agree to disagree at times, but it is that thing of, he's been around since the early 90s in a way that's always been speaking to not just the past but a future, and reframing his own experiences in a way that other people can access. And what is more profound than that at times? Yeah. And so I think people who actually come across that work will always appreciate his very unique perspective. Yeah. And if we all could just do even half of that, right, we would have long careers that would be regaled.
That's the key, is to have your own voice or your own sound, and really do that. That's really all there is to it at a certain level.
There's nothing else, and and even just to kind of, it's obviously like a trick of the mind to even think that we can be unique or different, but finding that little thing that is decidedly you, just turning that up slightly in the mix and letting that shine, not being ashamed to offer it. That's it.
So I know you have new music out too.
Yeah, I have a bit. The Bitterinders,
that dropped on vinyl, right?
Yeah, the vinyl finally came out. So the End of Empire series is on Brainfeeder, and it's just, I did a series of records about old-timey wars that were really sad. It's a sad group of records. Not because I felt sad necessarily, but because the situations of now were things I can't address.
Yeah.
And I couldn't put into song, but I could talk about then to talk about now.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of this translation that happened. So I did one about the Boxer Rebellion called Righteous Fists of Harmony, and a record about the Crimean War that was well back in the day, and that was called the Light Brigade.
Mm-hmm.
And more recently, the Second Boer War is a record I entitled The Bitter Einders. And if people want to go back into their Wikipedia and like learn the history of these things, I mean, it's all there, it's all interesting, and I certainly did, but for me it was much more about telling the tale of sometimes the loser rather than the victor, and kind of giving word and name to the mysticism that both brought maybe downfall, but also I just found so enlightening. There's so much, there's just, history offers us so many clues. I am terrible. My mind does not hold on to facts and figures. Like I have to either write things down. I have a lot of dyslexia, and it causes me to jump around on a page, but also in my mind, like, does not know where to file things.
Yeah.
And I think having that for this long while has allowed me to maybe look at history as not being so much, not even a construct or a timeline, but much more of this arbitrary set of facts and figures that seem to exist at all times.
Yeah.
And we kind of have access to that, like just, touching nodes on a string.
I feel like that's a big part of like what humans are, is a shared history and shared knowledge, and if we're just piling it up, and sometimes unfortunately we burn the library down and have to start over. But
well, there's an aspect of simultaneous invention and zeitgeist and these other kind of these weird psychic phenomena that we just kind of tend to invent at the same time, and we tend to think the same things, and culturally we allow these moments that seem to be preposterous, even a few years earlier or a few years later, but in those moments there's just group hysteria. It's like, how is it even possible that we all could be on the same page? So there's something more to it.
I was trying to tell someone this the other day. Someone said they're talking about like they had an idea and like protecting your ideas, and I was like, no one has ideas. What do you mean? It's like they exist. You know, that's like the biggest folly out there, is that you can have one and that it's special and unique to you.
It's a great fallacy, though. I mean, we've been sold it. I sometimes think the branding and reselling of cool is such an incredible invention of the 20th century, maybe more powerful than the atom bomb. Is we decided and found out ways to take the things that we should be celebrating in others, and we made them a commodity to be bought and sold by a few, or to be, profited from by a few. And I think it's just so profoundly changed culture that we just can't even conceive of an era where the cool and the desired and the affluent conspicuous consumption wasn't the forefront of our society. In fact, the drivers of our economies are all based in this notion of consumption, and it's destroying our planet, and it's killing us, and we're so indebted to it. And it was all because somebody thought something else was cool, and that how to best sell it to somebody else.
I've never thought about that. So you agree that cool is a thing. Things can be cool, but there was a time where that wasn't also sold.
It wasn't weaponized.
It wasn't weaponized.
It's like there's opium and then there's heroin.
Okay. Maybe
this is a tangent, but I just psychically I find it so interesting that especially with musical culture, it's like, rather than we have this idea that everyone demonstrably knows what's good or bad, and of course it's like completely false, or it's like such a fallacy in itself. But we've made these like clear distinctions in ways that make it so some things are, that rather than be celebrating the just act of creativity and everyone's individual offering, it's much more striated into the ones who do and the ones who don't, and just these crazy gates that we've put up.
It's interesting too, because it hasn't been necessarily weaponized by the cool people. It's other people.
I think when you talk to people who have ideas, or you talk about genius, or all the things, it's like you talk about the kind of people who usually invent things, literally. It's not them who profit off of it. It's the Steve Jobs of the world who render it cool. That's where the money is, right?
Yeah.
But that being said, doesn't have to get us down. We just have to reframe ourselves.
No, we don't. We just filled this memory card, which is incredible. 1 second. Part of this is not going to have video. Let me just try to get you in here. In one more here. This one should have space. This camera's been acting up on me. Shout out to Sony. It just stopped like reading one of the cards, and it's created like a very interesting situation here.
Yeah.
Where I have one card that it has 2 slots, which I thought would let me record more stuff, and
you have to manually change it still.
So now I think, okay, we can finish this one.
Okay.
So we'll have this will be nice, because if people are watching it, they're gonna have a nice black screen for a few minutes, and they can really listen to what we said.
Oh, well, I do think there's something nice. We do tend to gravitate towards whole offerings rather than piecemeal, but
yeah,
whatever works. I mean, hey, I'm really happy to be able to just share with you and talk with you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. See how the visual interrupted the audio though? If we hadn't been filming, we would have kept going. It would have been great. It's a fitting end, I think.
Sure.
I think it puts a nice bow on it all.
Okay,
so,
perfect.
Thank you so much for the time and the conversation. And it was, I mean, everyone go check out your music. Daedalus is Daedelus.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah, good, got it. Yeah,
So,
I spelled it a little bit differently, unknowingly. I spelled it differently than the Greek mythological figure who was the greatest inventor of that ancient age.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I got some new music out, but equally there'll be more someday soon. It's just always looking forward to whatever's next, and hopefully it won't be perfect, it won't be great, it'll just be what it is.
Yeah.
And that means that maybe I can do more of it for you in the future.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to your set tonight.
Thank you.
All right.